Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our ecologiQ Greener Infrastructure Week final webinar of the series this week. So you're here at the launch of the Supplier's Guide to Recycle First. Before we kick off, I do want to acknowledge that although we're dialing in virtually, we are dialing from traditional lands. So my name's Doy Lee. I'm the Industry Manager of ecologiQ, and I'd like to acknowledge that we are the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we are meeting. So for me, I'm dialing into you from the lands of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. So I pay my respects to the elders past and present and elders of any other Aboriginal communities who may be here today. So in traditional language, it's this time of year is the time for flowering grasses. So for a hay fever sufferer like me, it can be quite difficult. And luckily for you, I'm completely meted up today and ready to take on this webinar with all the antihistamines. But it's a very exciting time because for us, the team have been really busy developing this new resource, and my day job when I'm not here running these webinars is working with suppliers and manufacturers of recycled and reused products. And I suppose the guy that we're launching here today, and some of the experts that we've got on hand to talk to you through and prompt your thinking about how we can engage better with the sector really answers a lot of the FAQs or the ABCs that we get when businesses come to us and say, we want to work, we want to provide goods and services to the infrastructure projects here in Victoria. How do we go about doing that? So I won't steal the team's thunder. I'll hand over to Lauren Rowett, who has been instrumental in putting this together and obviously orchestrating this week's events. And we'll talk to you about, there is Guide to Recycle First and the guests that we have here today. Lauren, over to you.
Thank you, Doy, and hello everyone, and welcome to this really exciting session where we will be launching the newest ecologic resource, which is the Supplier's Guide to Recycle First. As Doy mentioned, we've got a fantastic lineup today, so I'm going to give a little bit of background and context around the guide, and after that we'll have the perspective from a contractor, so Fiona Bowie from the Northwest Program Alliance is with us, and then from the Department of Transport and Planning we have Liam Butcher joining us. Following the presentations, we'll have a bit of discussion and of course get to some audience Q&A. If you do have questions for our experts today, please do pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and we'll get to them later in the session. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the Recycle First policy impact, I just want to touch on that a little bit to start. The policy was first applied in March of 2020 to all big build projects that were tendered thereafter. Since then, it's had a really huge impact. So these are the latest figures that have come from the team and they're to 30th of September of this year. So really exciting to see that we're at 4.9 million tonnes of recycled materials being used in big build projects and therefore diverted away from landfill since the policy began. We love to think of things in MCGs here and we've almost filled 2 of them, which is so good to see. That graph on the right as well, you can see how quickly the uptake is scaling. So the graph's cumulative, but it's even the variance from Q1 of this year to Q3 of this year is really significant. If anyone listening in today was at the lunch that we had on Monday, you would have heard Kevin Devlin give a stat that I think is really incredible. And that's that in the last 14 months, we've used more recycled materials in these big build projects than we did in the first 3 years of the policy. So you can really see just how quickly this demand and the uptake is scaling and the size of the opportunity that's available to us as well. So looking at the policy itself, now you can go onto our website and download the policy. If you haven't, I do recommend you do and familiarise yourself with it a little bit, particularly if you're supplying in this space. It's always really good to know what's actually required. It's not a very long read. It's only about 6 pages, pretty easy to digest. So yeah, do jump on and have a look. But there are 2 really key requirements in that apply to contractors and projects. So the first one there is that tenderers must demonstrate how they will optimise the use of recycled materials. That word optimise is really intentional when writing the policy. We want to ensure that materials are still appropriate, that they're safe, that they're fit for purpose, and that they're not having any unintended or adverse outcomes as well. And the second key requirement there is that contractors must report on the types and volumes of recycled products that they've used per their contract requirements. So that second point is super important because it helps ecologiQ to get a really good understanding of that supply chain, to be able to identify and harness market opportunities, to address barriers that are coming up, but also to understand what that future infrastructure recycling infrastructure need might look like. So the policy is really written for contractors and project officers and asset owners as well, I guess, to sort of follow or be aware, but it has some quite significant or big impacts for the supply chain. Some of those key ones I just want to go through. So first of all, provision of data. So where previously specific data on what's been supplied to a project hasn't been asked for, contractors are now likely to be asking for what's in a product, how much, and where it's come from as well. Certification and verification of sustainability claims. So some projects might actually start asking for those claims to be verified. Product development. So you might find contractors are looking for products in recycled versions that they haven't asked for before, as they're looking to increase that recycled material use. So that's a really great opportunity for innovation as well, and adding new products to your range where you can, if you're open and willing to having those conversations with contractors. And then also you've got potentially more and also smaller suppliers entering the market. So this is really a key for the development of the guide that we're going through today. So as projects are looking to include more and more recycled products, they might come to suppliers that they hadn't previously procured from to start supplying in that space. And those suppliers might be sort of unfamiliar with the inner workings of this sector. Since the policy came into effect, ecologiQ and in particular the industry stream, so that's where Dory and myself both work, we've done a lot of engaging with the supply chain. So lots of different ways that we've done this through meetings, we've done surveys, we run events, we've held roundtables, the conferences that we've had over the past couple of years and more. So, and we've been gathering that sort of intel on what would support the supply chain to effectively operate in this sector and how we can sort of help support that. Some of the most common things that we've heard in terms of barriers and challenges. So suppliers not knowing who to talk to about specifications or how to go about engaging with those people. Duplication of effort. So there's a lot of that in existence for suppliers when you're talking about multiple asset owners and the different requirements of different projects. Procurement processes, so they can vary really greatly between projects and can be a really daunting process, particularly on a really big project and for a really small business or a small supplier or someone who's new to the sector and hasn't encountered these processes before. And then a lack of transparency. So that's around those procurement, like who to talk to, what those timelines look like, but also what actually happens during a procurement process, at when those things happen and also why. So over time, we've worked to address these challenges through a range of different means. So that can be through conversations with suppliers. We held a series of sessions at last year's Greener Infrastructure Conference, sorry. But what we've identified is a need to have something that was a reference point, something that can be easily consulted by suppliers and something that we can update over time as the landscape changes and that sector transforms and shifts as well. So really pleased today to be launching the first iteration of the Supplier's Guide to Recycle First. So this is a little sneak peek of what a couple of the pages look like inside. So at the end of the session, I'll share a QR code so you can go on, access this guide, download it and have a copy for yourself. But just really quickly, really broadly, I guess, the sections in it are, we've started out with a glossary of acronyms. We love to talk in acronyms in government. I'm guilty of it myself. So we've put in a list of some of the most relevant ones. We've got a section that explains kind of who ecologiQ are and why, the Recycle First policy and what is required underneath it, so those changes. I've got a section around the life cycle of a big build project. So that covers everything from who the different stakeholders are and what their roles and responsibilities are. So we're talking government, asset owners, contractors, and suppliers as well. Definitions of contract types. So there's lots of different contract types that are used, and how they kind of all fit together, what those processes look like within each one and how they differ. And then we've got a section on standards, specifications and approvals, and how to navigate those. And then it rounds out with a checklist of all the ecologic resources that are there to support suppliers. Throughout the guide, we've got lots of tips. There's some, did you knows, and then notes as well of how ecologic can help. I won't go too much into what the content is, but just share a little bit of guidance for the guide, if you will. So it's more informational than instructive. So as you'll see going through it, there's so much variance in how projects play out, and the requirements are vastly different depending on what a product is, what it's for. So we've begun with really wanting to help suppliers to understand the landscape and to give that really good base of how things generally work. The majority of the content then focuses on explaining those processes and demystifying what might otherwise be information that perhaps it's well-known sort of contractor and client side, but not so much called out, so suppliers might not know. So at what point suppliers are likely to be engaged in these processes, things like that. It is a guide, not a manual, but as I mentioned before, we've included tips and suggestions that might help when engaging with the project teams. We also cover what support's available from ecologiC. It's why we're here, and the guide points out key events and resources, and how and where ecologic can support the supply chain. And lastly, and really importantly, there's a link at the back of the guide for people to submit feedback. So it's an evolving sector, circular economy is still evolving. So what we really want is feedback on this guide. We want to know what's missing, what else might help you, what might now be incorrect or untrue, so that we can make adjustments to it as time goes on. So yeah, at the back of the guide, if you have any thoughts at all at any time whilst you're using it, please do click through and let us know so that we can help to keep it current and up to date and useful for you. So that's it from me for now. I would now love to invite Fiona Bowie up to the mic. So Fiona is the Director of Transformation and Sustainability at the Northwest Program Alliance, which is one of the alliances working on the Level Crossing Removal Program of Works. She has 15 years of experience delivering road, rail, energy and water infrastructure, and is currently strongly focused on leveraging project engineering teams to be able to enable the transition to sustainable materials. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm just getting that screen sharing. So that should be with you any moment. Okay, how's that looking? Great.
I'm still waiting for it. I can see your PowerPoint version.
Okay, let
not
me
presentation mode.
Stop that. Give it another try. Doesn't matter if you do the practice run. Okay, the screens have swapped since practice. Let's try this one. While I'm waiting for that to catch up with me, I've had a quick look at who's online, and I don't recognise a lot of the names, so that's great. You hopefully haven't heard this before, but also hopefully that means that I'm targeting suppliers that we haven't worked with before, and we'd love to increase our engagement with you guys. So
presentations are good.
Excellent, thank you. There we go. So to walk you through how we work as a contractor, I'm going to use a case study to help put everything into context. So we've recently completed our Key on Parade project at the level crossing removal project. And what we did on this project is we really focused strongly on recycled first. Even though that's not a contract requirement, it's just something that we were really interested in doing to increase our use of recycled materials at LXRP and John Holland. And so what we wanted to do was come up with an industry changing initiative to act as a beacon for the industry to say, look, this is how you could create a really strong urban precinct filled with recycled materials. The way we went about that is we set up a competition for the suppliers of recycled materials. This was back a couple of years ago, and we've now finished the whole process, and the station opened recently. So to do that competition process, what we did was a whole bunch of partnering and engaging with suppliers and industry partners to work out what an urban realm filled with recycled materials could look like. To do that, we partnered with ecologiQ way back in 2021, 2022. And between us, Northwestern Program Alliance and the Level Crossing Removal Project, we went to the stakeholders that are involved in the Key on Parade project. So that's Darebin City Council for this project, MTM as the asset operator. We also talked a lot to UDAP, which is the urban design partners that really control the look and feel of a lot of the outcomes of architecture and infrastructure in Melbourne. And then, of course, the suppliers as well. And what we said to the suppliers is, what is important to you when, sorry, not the suppliers, what is important to the asset owners. So to the councils, to the network operators, be that Yarra Trams, MTM, V-Line, what are the criteria that really determines what is a product that you would highly support in installing into your infrastructure? And we've presented this slide a couple of times before, and it's always been a small bit in the corner that's you can't really read. So what I'm going to do is in this session, I'm going to blow that up and really be open book about this is how asset owners and contractors really decide on the products that they're really interested in pursuing. So I really hope that gives you an understanding as to where a purchaser is coming from and what's important to them so that you can target that when you're pitching to contractors. So in the safety space, safety is non-negotiable. That is the case on all projects, and it will be the first questions that you get asked. When it comes to safety, there's really three aspects of safety. You can have the safety of the construction and the installation during that phase. You also need to consider the safety of the maintenance of it while it's in operation. And then if we're in the urban realm and the public-facing realm, and if you're in areas where a worker of that asset would be, then you need to consider the end user. So that could be the temperature of what you're installing, or is there a snagging risk? Flammability could be an issue. How the community and the public are interfacing with it. These are the things that are asked a lot of questions when we're considering alternative products. The next, of course, is money. So in the economic category, you of course have capital expenditure costs. But I've highlighted there installation costs is where a lot of suppliers can get the upper hand. So you may have a product that has an initial cost that's a little bit extra, but sometimes you can demonstrate that the installation is going to be faster and cheaper, and therefore that overhead of the purchase can be offset. That's very easy for us as a contractor to balance that equation and say, yep, we understand that the overall cost is going to be reduced for us. Where it gets a bit harder is if your operational costs are reduced compared to your initial costs. The reason for that, and this might not be something that you're exposed to, is there are two different buckets of money. So the contractor generally holds the money for the installation, but it will be the asset owner that ends up holding the bucket of money for the operations. And if those two parties aren't talking and discussing who's going to take the higher cost at which end, then it can be really tricky to get those products across the line. It's possible. It's easier in alliance models than it is in other contractual models, but it's something that we need to work through and something for a supplier to consider in how they talk about their product. I've put the cost of carbon in here. It's in twice, so it may be in two different buckets depending on where a contractor is working. So we consider the cost of carbon in our economic modelling, which I think is a great place for it to be, where the commercial people are talking about that cost. And we use the price of $126 per tonne. So that means it's not a huge impact, but it can, if the overhead of your product is slightly extra, it can be enough to just bring it down to the same as a business as usual costing. Other things I've popped in there is there could be R&D tax incentives that could be another way to sell the economics of it. We also need to consider the design life and the warranty periods, and then the replicable and scalable use cases that may demonstrate that if we've got a program that works, we're going to put an initial cost in the first project, but after that, the cost will be lowered over time. In the environmental space, I've popped in there also the carbon impact, of course, of the product. So this could be dealt with through both the installation of materials, the supply chain, the manufacturing energy of your product, and the transport of location. I imagine you're all local Melbourne, so that gives you a leg up as opposed to an international product, for example. We, of course, we're talking ecologic here today, so the recycled content and the waste avoidance, demonstrating that and putting a quantity on that is extremely helpful to us. And of course, the location from where your recycled content is. Environmental discharges, so your noise, vibration, light spill, leaching is a one, and odour. So those latter two are the ones that have come up for us in the past. And can really cause some problems when we aren't able to really nail those ones down with a clear answer when we're questioned about them. We've also got the end of life impacts. So you need to be able to answer, well, what happens when we need to reconfigure this project in 50, 100 years time? What are we going to do with this product? So that's definitely a question you need to be able to answer. And then it's always good if you've got additional co-benefits. So for example, you might have some biodiversity benefits as well that you may be able to promote. In the social space, aesthetics, that's very important to us here at Level Crossings. And on a number of the big build projects is the form, the shape, the texture, the colour, how it's going to weather over time. So what's the material going to look like in a year, 5 years, but also up to 60 years? We need to be able to demonstrate that this is a long-term good product. And when you're new to the market and you haven't got that demonstrated history, that is something that you need to be able to communicate. It's also great if you've got priority job seeker employment benefits or your local manufacturing. And of course, if you've got any other social benefits that you can include and talk about to us. And technical. So these are really your hurdle requirements. These are the things that you're going to need to be able to give solid answers about. So delivery risk is a big one for a contractor. So we need to be able to have confidence that the installation time is going to be a set predictable time frame. And are there specific requirements for your product? So does the people that are installing that product need to be trained beforehand? And there's only 4 people in Victoria that can install that product. These are the types of things that are going to need to be known well in advance of us selecting the product. There's also a lot of benefit if you've got design flexibility of how that product is installed. So if you've got a very inflexible detailing of your design, then it becomes harder for us to have confidence that if things change last minute, we've got that flexibility to adapt with the changes that inevitably occur in delivery of construction projects. How available is your product? Is it off the shelf? Is it pre-manufactured and you need 12 months lead time? These are important considerations for us. And finally, of course, compliance with design standards, which is probably going to lead into Liam's sphere in terms of type approvals and or else if you don't have an approval, how far along the journey are you, and is it just that you need us to partner with you to demonstrate that installation, which is what we did on Project Beacon. So to give you a couple of case studies, I've got 3 products to finish off to give you an example of those things that I just ran through. Here's some of them that hit the mark on a lot of them. So RoboVoid is one that we used in a parketeer slab. It's a concrete void former made from 100% recycled plastic, and it ticked a lot of the boxes for us. So it's lightweight, giving us safety benefits because you're reducing the amount of weight that workers are carrying around the site. It's an ultimate cost-saving outcome. So it's reducing our concrete quantities by 30%, therefore saving us money. Along with those carbon reductions from that 30% concrete reduction. We've also got the recycled content that's coming into that project. It was manufactured just around the corner from us, so highly local, readily available. And the design is modular. So there's a lot of that flexibility that if we needed to suddenly increase or decrease that design by 100 mil, we could have achieved that. And very easy installation, which was demonstrated during the project. Series Fairwood is one that we worked with to reclaim the timber that we were salvaging from site. They milled, stored it, and then brought it back for our seating. So when analysing their proposal, they were cost comparable to other options with the added benefit of reusing timber rather than purchasing virgin timber with less local benefits. They're also a social enterprise, which is an excellent co-benefit of their reuse strategy. And timber reuse is important to a lot of the communities that we work in. So it gives us that reputational bonus in that assessment as well. And they were able to work with our designers closely in order to ensure that the trees that we were salvaging were the tree species that is suitable to achieve the design style that we were looking for. And finally, Curvecrete. So they robotically curve concrete effectively using a geopolymer with 0% cement mix. They were selected because they have a precast model. So that precast is often a good way for us to work in giving us assurance that we've got the product ready to go and removing a lot of the safety hazards that come with working on site. They have an initial investment. So where I was talking that economic sphere, they do have upfront costs, but those are remitted with a long-term benefit in their reuse and remanufacturing processes. They've got a significant carbon reduction, which was the biggest sell point for us. It's made to spec and made to order, and the final product is extremely similar to the business as usual case. So therefore, that reduces a lot of the discussion in the aesthetics and maintenance side of things. So I think that is it from me. Final slide is just to let you know that if you're interested in any of the details on that particular case study, we've released our 2023 annual sustainability report. So you can find all the specifics if you're interested in there, and I've provided a QR code for that. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Yeah, Project Beacon was such an awesome project. And yeah, you mentioned at the beginning there as well, it was 2 or 3 years from sort of that ideation to it actually coming into effect. And this was with us really taking a lot of interest and, following it really closely. So just really demonstrates how long things can take before, you know, they actually sort of happen. And I know a lot of those installs as well, these all happened in the last couple of months. It was pretty recent. So yeah, really, really long timelines, which I think need to be considered, I guess, from suppliers that we don't always know. Thank you so much. Next up, I'd like to introduce Liam Butcher. Liam is the Director of Maintenance Operations at the Department of Transport and Planning, and he leads a newly formed statewide team responsible for delivering routine, periodic and renewal programs across Victoria. He's got experience at VicRoads' Major Projects Division and the Level Crossing Removals Project, with a wide variety of experience in all facets of project management, from planning, pre-construction, design, construction, health and safety, environmental management and project completion. Welcome, Liam.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it. Let me bring this screen up. You can let me know when everyone can see that. That'd be great.
We can see it. Take it away.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So welcome, everybody. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit around sort of in the road maintenance space, which is the current world that I'm working in, and how we see recycling as part of our tenders and the like, and just some few facts and figures around what we have achieved over the last couple of years, but also where the department's heading, I suppose, in alignment and in conjunction with the ecologiQ work. So this will have quite a road maintenance focus, and probably just initially, if I can get this thing working, I just probably wanted to give an overview on what is road maintenance, and that'll help with putting context when I give some facts and figures around where those figures are coming from. So road maintenance, we as Lauren mentioned, we've just recently formed a statewide team now. We previously used to be in a metro and a regional type environment. We now manage road maintenance in a statewide team. What does that mean? We've got to the point of having a consistent contractual model now across the majority of the state, which we call our Victorian road maintenance contracts. And I say that because that is a big part of that is the recycle first policy. So we're starting to administer our road maintenance works in a consistent way, and one aspect of that is in the recycled material space. So road maintenance in itself, we have effectively three main programs, components. The base function of road maintenance is what we call our routine maintenance. They're your regular activities, whether it's sweeping, pothole patching, edge drop-offs, vegetation management, all those sort of real routine type activities that are happening day to day out of the network by our road crews. We then have annually what we reference as our periodic program, and it's not just in the pavement space, and probably a lot of today what I talk about will be pavements, but we obviously cover structures, drainage, and other infrastructure and assets. What we don't do is the ITS network and the Westgate Bridge, for example. They are separate programs, so that they're not. I'm sort of referencing those as of today, but in our periodic space, we do a lot of road resurfacing and some periodic structural works. The big part of the program is in our resurfacing, and that's either in the sprayed seal or the asphalt space, obviously. Regionally, in the rural areas, a lot more spray sealing compared to obviously in the metro space, a lot more asphalting. And we also do slurry seals and a bit of regulation, which is sort of effectively flattening out the surface, taking out all those lumps and bumps before we do put a seal over. So there's a few types of periodic type works we undertake. The next level is where we have real failed pavements. We need to rehabilitate it. And if we compare sort of environments that can move from a crushed rock type pavement, multiple layers with a sprayed seal surface on it, to again, probably more in the metro space, you might have the deep strength asphalt type arrangements. So just putting a bit of context on what road maintenance is, and to give you a bit of a flavour of where we can use certain materials. So just touching on the previous couple of years, we've had significant investment from the government, and that's continuing this year, which I'll touch on. But if we do work back to 22, 23, where we had $760 million worth of investment, we did have the October 22 floods, which was not ideal, but we got extra funding that helped us towards sort of recovery of the network. With these few facts and figures are just around sort of the volume of works we do. So you can see there in our regional areas particularly, we had just under 300,000 jobs complete. Now, what's a job? A job could be, it's a maintenance job, so it might be fixing a sign could be a single job, fixing 3 signs could be a single job. It's how the contractors actually go out there and just plan their works. Fixing a pothole versus fixing 10 potholes, that could be a job. Or an activity that gets logged into our system. But you can see there, over 300,000 potholes repaired. Government seems to love the number of potholes when we give that as all parts of media, but it is extensive and it's a lot of work that the crews do. Over just under 8,000 signs being repaired across the network and nearly 5,000 trees planted. So that's mostly in our regional sense. 2 years ago, it's been a little bit of a battle to get information across the state. We can do that a bit better now, but this just gives you a bit of an example, particularly in the regional areas. You know, almost 1,800 kilometres of roads were resurfaced, so that's either being rebuilt or just resurfaced, waterproofed, if you like, and you can see some of those figures there. Tyres has been a big part of what we do in road maintenance, and you know, almost 2,000 tonnes of tyres, part of our materials used on the network, particularly in the asphalting space. Similar with glass, we've seen a bit of a journey on glass used in our products over the last couple of years, and I've been with the department for nearly 6 years. I know early on that the cost associated with glass replacing sand, for example, meant the costs were higher for that, particularly as we move further away from Metro Melbourne. What we've seen over the last couple of years is that pricing starting to really level out, which is awesome. So some of the challenges we have is the more rural you go, the harder it is to get product there, but we're seeing really good headway into that space too, particularly in the asphalts around the state. Geofabric too, there are some of the recycled materials used in some of those products. We've put a lot of that down as part of our sealing works as well in 22-23. If we move to 23-24, and we can start to see some of these figures similarly, but some ramping up, particularly in the glass space. That's where that little journey I said, we're starting to see that level out really quite well. You know, 7 million odd bottles used as part of our materials. Similar figures in the tyres, a lot of wraps, a lot of recycled asphalt pavements across the network, as well as the pre-coat recycled bitumen and diesel. So yeah, that just gives you a bit of a flavour of where we're at and what we've sort of delivered over the last couple of years. Before I sort of move into this, if we look at this year, you know, we've got just under $1 billion as part of road maintenance, and that covers our ITS network, our Westgate Bridge program, and a significant portion is our road maintenance program. So as I sort of mentioned before, we have these new contracts, Victorian road maintenance contracts, of which the Recycle First policy is a key trigger in that. And we've touched on it, Lawrence touched on it, Fiona's touched on it. You know, what we're looking to achieve is that maximising of recycled materials. And it seems to be predominantly in our road surfacing sort of works. But as I sort of mentioned before, we do a lot of periodic structures work, noise wall repair, and lots of other things that aren't just the black stuff. But we do want to see a bit of a boost in supply and demand and make sure that we can head towards a space where the recycled products, compared to some more the more traditional type products, price doesn't become an issue and starts to become really beneficial to use these recycled products. Innovation I'll touch on in a little bit too, but we as the department, and not just in road maintenance, we are really keen to sort of help and partner with industry to drive innovation, particularly in environments where we might have fiscal pressures. If we can do things more efficiently and better, and then supporting in the recycle space, like, you know, you're winning on lots of fronts. So super keen to continue in that innovation space with industry as well. Just getting better data, as sort of Fiona mentioned in hers, we're talking on a much lower scale in terms of project value in road maintenance compared to the big build, but we are looking to get better data to help inform sort of some decisions on how we might set our program or what outcomes we want from our program. So just on that, we are as a department, what is our risk appetite? Obviously, we've probably currently, and maybe over the last couple of years, we focus on what those approved products are. And Fiona mentioned before, we have our engineering and standards team that approve our products, whether it be in asphalt mixes, sprayed seal designs, whatever it is. So we've probably focused on using what is approved, but really keen, and that's even coming down from the Minister's office. We're getting a real sense of any way we can do things more efficiently with better products and recycled products as part of that. They're really on board for. So super keen to work with industry to make sure we are driving that in our decision making as well, and working closely with ecologiQ and the team. I know the department as a whole has been doing that for some time now, just to make sure that it's not just in the big build and the big stuff, that it does flow right down the project scale, if you like, into our smaller works. That's sort of sub 50 mil type works. We are in the process of developing sort of our guidance materials that help align for the Recycle First policy, that align with ecologiQ's guidance. And that is, as I sort of mentioned, for the lesser value projects. I say lesser, $50 million is still big jobs, but the lesser than the big build type stuff. And where we're heading in that is, getting tenderers to give us an indication as part of their tender around potential quantities of materials that can be used, reused, demonstrating that those environmental benefits up front, so we can sort of work towards that through the actual delivery. But reporting's a big one as well. Now that we're particularly in road maintenance, we're reporting in a consistent way across the state. We don't have contracts going out there that are written very differently in Gippsland compared to a lot of Mallee or Metro Melbourne. We are now driving consistency more than ever, and reporting is going to be a big part of that, and making sure we're working with our providers to help us give us that information. So there might be a bit more administrative burden on our providers, but it's for good reason to try and be well informed and understood on what materials we can use and what we can get on the network. So we're hoping our DTP's guidance materials will be released in sort of early 2025. So stay tuned for that. And I think that's it. Thank you, Lauren. So yeah, back to yourself.
Thanks so much, Liam, and great to see so much recycled materials being used in those maintenance operations works already, and a lot of opportunity too. I do wonder how many potholes make up an MCG. So if you know that, let us know. I'll invite you both to come back to camera, and we'll get into a little bit of discussion and Q&A. Now, we did open a bit of a survey, I guess, for suppliers to submit questions ahead of time. So we've got some sort of set questions that we'll start off with, but please, audience, do keep popping your questions in the chat. There's a couple of good ones there already, and we will get to them. Fiona, my first question is a bit for you. We've got lots of RFQs, or requests for quote, are provided to contractors, so by suppliers, whilst they're tendering. Whilst the contractor is tendering, but often a supplier won't get notified whether A, they were successful in securing the contract, B, if they'll proceed with procurement, or C, when that might happen. This can cause difficulties for suppliers with planning their production runs, particularly if it's a large order, ends up getting confirmed with a short lead time. Do you have any advice, or is there a way for suppliers to be able to know this information or better navigate those situations?
Sure. Look, I'm going to be honest, we're not great at the communication, especially when a contract has not been successful. Obviously, during the start of a project, when you're procuring potentially 300 plus packages, the team are working extremely quickly. So the communication back may be missed or slower. So my tips for that would be look at the websites of the projects to understand the timeframes of those projects. If it's a Northeast Link SRL and it's an 8-year project, that means that your timeframes are going to be extremely stretched, unless you know that your product is one of the first products on the bill. But if you've got an urban design landscaping product that's coming in 8 years, it's going to be a long time before you're going to hear back. So get an understanding of what scale is the project that you're applying for, and therefore what sort of timeframes are these guys working on, and then try and time when you're calling and following up if you can, in relation to that a bit. So if you know that you're working on a little, as Leon said, $50 million job, you're going to be able to call pretty quickly, and those projects are moving fast. Unfortunately, like even this project, which is one of our smaller projects, like Lauren said, it took us 3 years to get to the actual installation of all of these products from when we first started engaging with them. So that's the type of timeframes that you're working on. I guess the other thing is use your sustainability contacts. So they're going to be more incentivized to talk back with you than potentially the engineer or the commercial manager on a project might be. If you're a recycled first supplier, it's the sustainability teams that really want to engage with you and are likely to pick up the phone and have that two-way conversation with you.
Thanks, Fiona. And I know as well from speaking with projects that, you know, we quite often get asks from suppliers, hey, what's happening with this? And the reality is that we sometimes don't know. There's so many reasons that things can be delayed or what have you. So yeah, it's a big sort of area that there's not a lot of visibility on, and it's not that anyone's keeping it from you, it's that no one necessarily has a lot of visibility on it, which is just unfortunately the way that it happens. Liam, I've got one for you next. How motivated are the Department of Transport to pursue innovation and new materials to replace the business as usual? What are your biggest concerns so suppliers can make sure they're as prepared as possible when setting themselves up for success?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I sort of touched on it before. Our appetite, if you like, is getting more and more in the innovation space. That's across the board, recycled products being a part of that. And the reason I say that, it is around just being more efficient. If the economical environment stays as it is for the next X amount of years or whatever it is, we need to do things more efficiently. So if there's products out there and there's innovations that help us do that, I think the department is really keen to hear about it. In terms of how suppliers can sort of make sure that they're prepared, I suppose it's around. We obviously have, as everybody does, we have standards we need to meet as well. So we've got to be really careful around making sure that it's well demonstrated, I suppose, particularly if I think road maintenance, if we're going to use new materials when it comes to resurfacing, and we need to make sure that resilience is still there in the network. So how we can work with industry around proposals, how we can maybe work with industry around trials, we're certainly open to that. And to be honest, we're having a lot more discussions in that space in probably the last 6-12 months than I can recall. So that's really good. We now just need to work towards some good, strong trials that help us have that confidence in new products and give us that resilience that we sort of need as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to jump across to the Q&A now. We've got a couple of really great questions coming in. First one is for you, Fiona, and it comes from Dave. Do contractors ask the same questions about performance and compliance that you ask of recycled products to suppliers of non-recycled products? So are the checks undertaken to ensure claims about any product are actually delivered? There seems to be a lot of scrutiny for what is new, but not for what is business as usual.
Yep, sure. So short answer, yes. But what it's going to appear like is that the new products are getting the scrutiny because the older products have done the scrutiny. So take the example of concrete sleepers. That's top of mind because we're installing them today, Duratrack sleepers onto Yarra Trams assets. So that was 1.5 years of getting that type approved with Yarra Trams, getting all the engineering certifications, the type approval, the safety assurances to ensure that these products are the equivalent of your concrete sleepers who've gone through that process many, many years ago. But now it's just, here's all the certs, they're standard, we use them across the network. All the checks and balances are still there, but it's very, very fast and it's very, very easy. From a sustainability perspective, the scrutiny is there for both products because that hasn't historically happened. So those teams are analysing the data that they're getting from both and possibly scrutinising the older products more because they may not have the level of data that some of the new products have come onto the market, knowing that they're going to get asked about the carbon and they're going to get asked about the recycled content. So the suppliers that are coming with that immediately, we then go to the old product and say, well, what do you got? And they're sometimes like, oh, I've never been asked this before. So I would say that the checks and balances are there, especially for quality, safety, engineering, and sustainability on an equal footing.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth mentioning as well, Fiona, that, standards and specifications are not just for new products or recycled products, they're for all products, regardless. Yep. So yeah, if I guess in reading the guide, you could kind of think that it's a guide for any supplier, really, because everyone needs to meet those same criteria.
Absolutely.
It's just these new materials, I guess, have an extra hurdle because you've got to prove a new idea first. So you've got to get everyone's thinking around there as well. Another question here, which I think is great. I'm not sure who best placed to answer, but any advice on how it is possible for suppliers to prove asset life, i.e. 50 years, for innovative materials in a shorter time frame? So how do you prove that it lasted 50 years without taking 50 years to prove it?
I can probably talk just from a road maintenance perspective. I think, and we have, depending on the pavement design, obviously you have different design lives, much shorter life for sprayed seal, so you don't necessarily have to wait for the 10, 15 years. But I think in the pavement space, within the first couple of years at least on whether a trial is looking to be successful through, minor cracking, whatever it is. I think there's some signs that help, particularly I'm talking probably more just the road maintenance and servicing, a bit easier than proving a structural asset or something that's going to have 50 plus years design life. So I think in working with the department's engineering and standards team and just having strong data to support your points, I think can go a long way. And I've seen some things recently that don't necessarily have strong data behind it, so it's a bit hard to sort of take it on face value if you haven't got that strength behind it. But in the pavement space, I think within a couple of years you would get a good feel on how it is performing, and there's tests that we can do to sort of support the assumptions that it might have a longer design life or an equivalent design life, but the use of getting recycled products or whatever. So yeah, it's probably from a road maintenance perspective.
Yeah, thanks. And I think as well, yeah, it's important to, I guess, note that the labs that do this testing, they have these great ways that they can test for things like that. So for example, NTRO, I know I've been to their facility and they've got this contraption that kind of actually runs the weight of a car over a piece of pavement back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So you get, over a couple of days what it's like for, I don't know how many millions of cars to be going over that pavement. So you can actually speed up those processes as well. Another one here might be a little bit more for me, I guess, but there's often some resistance from design engineers to incorporate recycled products because they're not included in specifications. Is there any work within government departments to update specs to have them more easily incorporated in the design stage? One thing I can say that from an ecologic perspective is the policy was written stating that you only can use recycled materials that are already included in the spec. So a lot of them actually are already included in specifications. It just might not be necessarily as well known. So we've actually got some great resources. They're on the ecologiQ website. There are reference guides, and they literally set out what all the specifications are, where to find them. They're all linked, and they say what materials you can and can't use that are recycled within each of those products. But I guess, Liam, is there any work within government departments to update specs to have them more easily incorporated in the design stage? Any comment on that?
Probably similar to what you've just said. I know our engineering and assets and engineering team are constantly, and particularly over the last 18 months, doing sort of full reviews as the department's changed, I suppose, and we have been through change over the last couple of years, few years, constant change. Just around reviewing policy. So I know that is ongoing. But I think you made a good point, Lauren. A lot of it is, there is a lot of stuff in there now. It's probably just about knowing where to pull it and understanding where it is and what we can do. But I would just encourage working with our construction materials teams, engineering teams, yeah, just around what products that are available and how they might meet those sort of specifications. But yeah, that's probably about it from me, I think.
Yeah. Just noting the time, we've got time for another couple of questions. So we've got one here from Bradley. How can suppliers of new materials best engage with the standards process where no standard exists for the category of material? Is ecologiQ, DTP, etc., willing to work with suppliers to develop new standards? I guess I can answer that a little bit, Bradley. Standards are kind of Australian owned or they're internationally owned, whereas it's specifications that we'd be talking about more so. And yes, absolutely, that's one of the things ecologiQ does is please come to us, let us know where there might be prohibitive specifications and we can help take it to DTP and support to get it changed where possible. We also have developed new specifications, so ecologiQ had quite a lead role in coming up with a new specification for recycled plastic noise walls, which were used on the Morty Alec Freeway in 2020, I think it was. So yes, there is definitely a way, and that's part of the role that we're here to do. I wanted to ask one final question to both of our panel members, and then we'll share where to find the guide. So what is the one piece of advice that you would have for recycled materials suppliers who are looking to supply to transport projects in Victoria? Where's the one thing that you see that people get tripped up the most, and the piece of advice that you could give to get around that? Fiona?
I think where people get tripped up is give us a really clear package of your information. That goes a long way because it's easily affordable, and it's amazing where these emails end up if it's a single PDF that contains very simply, here's all the specs we make, here's our carbon calculations, whatever the information, kind of like I've gone through just then, that will go a long way in, we'll send that to our asset owners. It'll go a lot of places in order to get your products across the line.
Yeah, I might just add to that as well. I think it's a really good point, Fiona. But for me too, it's if industry has a proposal, I think it needs to be a really clear and engaged proposal, if that makes sense too. I think there's instances where I know in our space where plenty of suppliers might come and say, "Oh, we've got this. It's great. Can you use it?" It's like, well, how do we actually partner together to use it? And be really clear on what that proposal looks like and what it can really achieve, and demonstrate. I sort of talked to that evidence thing a bit before, that data space, but that's probably what I'd say around really clear proposals around how we can work together on trialing some of this stuff.
Yeah, if I can just go on the back of that, don't greenwash. Just give the actual, give us a spreadsheet with the numbers and the formulas, and that will go much further than just overarching we're carbon neutral statements.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for your time. I'm just going to share my screen here now. This is the link to be able to find the guide. So it has been published as of today. So if you're on our Knowledge Hub, it is published there. You can also email us for a copy. But easiest way, there's a QR code. Please scan it, grab your phone out now, and you can download a copy. Fiona, Liam, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. It's been absolutely invaluable. You've both contributed to the report, to the guide, as well, which is great. We've had, so many people help in putting this together, and we hope it's going to be a really valuable resource. Thank you again, and I'm going to hand back to Doi now to close the session.
Thank you, Lauren. And I'd like to again reiterate in thanking Fiona and Liam for joining us on today's webinar, and second Lauren's sentiments around the contributions to that guide. So for me, some of you may know, I was off on parental leave and I came back. So the guide has been an invaluable ABC for me to return and really understand the landscape, and also just look at, and I think if you're a business looking to enter the space, will be really, really useful, and just a great resource for understanding and making heads and tails of our sector. So that brings us to the end of Greener Infrastructure Week. I hope you've been able to catch some of our other webinars and maybe even join us on some of the site tours. So yesterday, for example, I had the great privilege of going back out to Cannon Park Station, having worked with Fiona and her team a few years ago on that Recycle First competition, and really encouraged to see some of those innovative products in the ground, in the precinct, and in a public space as well. So again, I encourage you to download the guide. If you're not already subscribed on our Knowledge Hub, then request access to our ecologiQ Knowledge Hub. It really is a treasure trove of resources where we have the reference guides and other case studies and information for you to tap into. And also to just follow us on our social media and LinkedIn as well. So although this is the end of Green Infrastructure Week, it's not the last piece of engagement you'll have from ecologiQ. In a couple of weeks' time, Friday, December 6th, I'll be running our last innovation showcase for the year. So some of you may be familiar, but if you're not, the showcase event is an opportunity for new businesses to come along and pitch new products or innovations to people like Liam and other members from DTP, level crossings, and major road and rail authorities and projects. And in actual fact, many of the products that ended up on Cannon Park Station through the Recycle First competition started out as a pitch on our showcase series, probably well over 4 years ago. So I encourage you to catch that, and you can find the details on our socials. It will come out soon. Further ado, I'd like to thank you for taking the hour and joining us for today's webinar, and hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you all.